want to welcome everybody to the Tuesday edition of the Daily Cheat Sheet. I think it's important before we do get to the news for a second to go back in a timeline of media events that were extremely intensified with massive numbers. We don't have to go back that far. We could go to the Mueller investigation, the Steele dossier, go to COVID, stories that were just so incredible. The numbers they used in these stories were so massive that they were not true. The media has sort of learned their lesson and said, well, let's not go massive. Let's just say instead of 200 Gazans were killed today, 31 Gazans were killed today, because that became more believable, go on, than saying 200. And if you notice, since Mar-a-Lago, since all these events, they've been changing the way they report to not make the stories as massive, but just a little more believable.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. In fact, New York Times today, the morning report, the top story of the day, Gaza. This morning, Israeli soldiers opened fire near crowds of Palestinians walking towards a food distribution site. At least 27 people were killed and dozens were wounded, the Gaza Health Ministry said. Always the Gaza Health Ministry. I feel like they have another name, a nickname, a synonym. Oh, right, it's Hamas. So yesterday, I believe there was a story about 31 Palestinians that were killed by the Israelis walking towards a food distribution site, reported by CNN, the New York Times, BBC, and on and on. And then, oopsie, turns out Hamas, who rapes and pillages and kills and tortures and kidnaps, turns out they're also liars. Who would have thought that of all their sins, lying would be one of them? I'm as surprised as you are. So I guess that's why everyone took their word for it, since there were no other witnesses cited. And of course, not long after, the BBC offered their retraction that nobody saw. Claim graphic video is linked to aid distribution site in Gaza is incorrect, they said. This came through BBC Verify. And almost 12 hours later, the news story came out. This time it was 27. CNN runs with the headline, IDF kills civilians at an aid site. Surprise, no bodies, no proof. And even the aid group on the ground says nothing happens. But I mean, clickbait is clickbait. We don't want facts to get in the way of any of that. And who was their source this time? I mean, it couldn't be the same people who lied to them yesterday. Oh my God, it is the same people who lied to them yesterday. This is, I mean, I wanted to say irresponsible, but Jesus Christ, that does not cover it. This is criminal. This is something that the journalists, the press, the media, they all should be held accountable. This should be something where people should be thrown in jail, because now when people die, they are aiding and abetting. And it's not that it stopped once it was debunked. The New York Times put up new headlines after the retractions went out. This is something that is endemic, and it is something that will not change unless there are consequences.
Well said, Mend. Again, we go back and look at this war throughout. It was massive numbers they were using, massive. Unbelievable numbers that turned out to be not true. So they've lowered the numbers. Maybe that becomes more believable. They give it to their friends at the BBC, who apparently Hamas and Reuters and the BBC have direct contact with whoever the leader of the day is for Hamas, and they spread these lies, man.
The BBC has spent the better part of the last 3 episodes of NewsHour talking about the amount of Palestinians that were killed by Israelis. They started out with the story saying that it was tank fire at the people that were going to the Israeli-American distribution sites to pick up food aid that was being handed out, bypassing Hamas, therefore cutting off the financial funding of Hamas. Hamas came out and said that they are going to attack people that would go to these distribution sites. And when an attack takes place, the first thing that the legacy media does is blame Israel. These guys spend days, for the BBC, it's been the last 3 days, interviewing people, interviewing former ministers that hate the current Israeli government, interviewing doctors that are volunteering in Gaza. There's no firsthand real account witnesses. And when they do, they'll, talk to some guy on the ground. It's usually a Hamas operative just repeating their lines. We lived through COVID. We lived through the Biden dementia era where he was just walking into walls and they were saying he was cogent. Anybody who still believes them is just an idiot. It's willful idiocy. So I don't take them seriously. I don't think anyone else can. And to their credit, the Israeli government does not. So when the BBC does these stories, they go, nobody from the Israeli government was available for comment. And that's the way it should be. Just ignore these people.
Well said, both of you. Great assessment. Go on. I just want to finish this quickly with this. Republicans or conservatives, whatever you want to call them, after Bush had a, let's just say, a come to Jesus moment. And the party shifted. They started questioning their leaders. They started questioning the ideas that were being given to them for the better part of 30 to 40 years of taking over countries, of war, of all these things. And they changed. Many of them changed, and hence the MAGA movement. The left has not changed. No matter what the lie, they still believe it.
It's one of those things that when you look at the makeup of the left, we talked yesterday about John Fetterman being someone who was willing to stand up, willing to say no to the doctrine that had been handed down from the left's Mount Sinai. But they swallow anything on the whole that their leaders give them. They don't ask questions. They don't debate. As you said, Matt, a moment ago, Biden could freeze mid-sentence, fall off a stage, and then literally go, look into camera, because it said that on the teleprompter, and they'd be like, most votes in history, no problem. At a certain point, it's hard to take them seriously, because if there's no one on the left that is willing to call out their own party, if there's no one on the left that is willing to go against the narrative, all it is just an echo chamber. The left doesn't debate ideas. They enforce narratives. When Nancy Pelosi was running things, she was able to get everybody to vote the same way every time. On the right, that doesn't happen. And look, I personally think, I know that Mend, I understand fighting fire with fire. And Judah, I know you talked about how frustrating it is that the right doesn't do this. But I personally think that internal conflict means strength. We talked yesterday about principles. I think it means principles. I think it means that backbone that we keep coming back to that is missing in many politicians. I like when that happens. I don't like when you can put a house plant in a suit, and if it has the right letter next to it, everyone votes for it. To me, that's not the way this is supposed to work. I'm sure our viewers or our listeners have noticed this, that one day there is a phrase that no one has ever said ever. That's Monday. And on Tuesday, there is this new word or new phrase that no one has ever heard, no one has ever said, but every channel, NPR, PBS, the legacy media, is saying it in lockstep, verbatim. Do they all have a secret WhatsApp group where they're getting their talking
Yes,
points?
they actually, yes, they do. And to summarize what you just said, remember when the term cheap fake came out? Every single media organization. Man, I want to just finish this up with you, because to his point, when they do speak out, especially when the Democrats are in charge, look at Matt Taibbi, a liberal who wrote for Rolling Stone for God knows how many years. And when the Twitter files came out, he reported on them. The day he was called up to the House to testify, the IRS paid a visit to his house.
They've weaponized and broken every single protocol and all the norms that we had in government. There's absolutely nothing. And I'm not encouraging the Republicans to do the same thing, but there's nothing that the Republicans can do that would be worse than what the Democrats did over the last 4 years. They've literally broken all the rules. Matt Taibbi is a great example. The guy's an award-winning journalist. And when he broke the Twitter files and got called before Congress to testify, the Democrats chose to shoot the messenger. They chose to go after him. It was insane. And while they were crucifying him on Capitol Hill and trying to belittle his accomplishments in his career, they sent the FBI to go raid his house. In a previous episode, we did say fight fire with fire, and I do think that the Republicans should have the gloves off. And what I mean by that is don't give anyone a pass. They gave Hillary a pass. They gave a lot of people a pass in the past and did not go after them, and I think they should. You broke the law, looking at you, Letitia James and Adam Schiff and everyone else. You broke the law, take them down, make them pay, make an example out of them. That's the only way we're going to get back to civility.
I want to move on to Republicans have had a major issue. Conservatives have had a major issue as far as social issues go. And I had written a story for the Daily Caller. If you wanted me to write something about Trump, and losing the women's vote in 2020. And that was a narrative that I believed everybody had said it. And I started doing my due diligence, and I actually cited the Daily Beast saying this was an absolute lie. I mean, he lost the women's vote, but he didn't lose by more than he had in 2016. If anything, he had gained on that. My point being is we do not know how to socially message a lot of things, from gay marriage. We've witnessed it to abortion, to all these different things. And the greatest gift the left gave us was the trans stuff. They really thought they could push this narrative, and they took it over the top. And I believe that's a big reason they lost this past election. Now, today there's a story out. Republicans want to cut funding for PBS and Sesame Street because of their grooming, as they call it. And both of you are parents and men. I know this is a subject that is near and dear to your heart, and this should not be going on Sesame Street. Sesame Street should be for every kid.
Yeah, there's two parts to the trans issue. Um, on the one hand, there are these kids that are confused and they need to have a space where they fit in. The other hand is you don't impede on little girls and their sports to make some boys that are confused feel fit in. If you want to have an independent new category where trans athletes compete against trans athletes, by all means, you do that. But to impede upon girls' rights and their ability to get awards and scholarships by allowing males to compete against them is just unfair to the girls. So that's part one. Part two is kids are kids. And if you're going to be teaching them the ABC, that applies to all kids. It doesn't have to be trans kids. So there's no reason to be adding that stuff in to Sesame Street. Sesame Street should be about, being good neighbors, being good people. And it's a bunch of characters anyway. I mean, you're talking about dolls. Dolls don't have sexual functions, and they shouldn't be injecting that into it. You should just leave it be. And it's one of the problems that the left continuously does is they overstep in a massive way. They overstep with immigration. They overstep with these trans athletes competing against girls. They overstep with women's rights, all of it. So, and there's pushback. There's definitely pushback right now. And I think it's appropriate.
Golan, to his point, that is the Republicans' only saving grace oftentimes, is they can't control themselves. As I've said in the past, I call Democrats, many of them, they're like premature ejaculators. They just cannot control themselves. So when they have a win, they have to really go for it. We just got this passed. Let's get this next bill passed. And here we are. And parents are really sick of it. I hope Republicans message this correctly, not like Ron DeSantis did with that minute and a half, 2-minute video, really mocking the gay community, which I was offended by. And I hope they do this correctly, because this is an important point for parents and children. You should be able to put your kids in front of a television and not be terrified they're going to be indoctrinated or groomed.
Absolutely. Ultimately, what it is we're not protecting kids anymore. There was a time, that whole idea, as you were saying, man, is this is a place where you're supposed to go for morals and values and understanding your manners and very simple things, how to be a human being. But now the kids are being used as pawns, right? We have an adult ideological battle, and we want to use them to try and get our message across. That's not progress. That's just exploitation. You're just using these kids for your purposes. Let's be honest. If Sesame Street right now ran an entire month where they focused specifically, I don't mean that they were existing, but if they focused specifically on just nuclear families the entire time, 1 month, nuclear family month, everyone would be going crazy on that side. This is a heteronormative propaganda. Why is this any different? What I don't want is I don't want a kid who doesn't know how to spell identity to suddenly be told about gender identity, something that they are not capable of understanding. And by the way, this has nothing to do with being anti-anything. I just think there's a difference between respecting people and confusing toddlers. I think that Pride Month doesn't belong as part of preschool curriculum, and Sesame Street is designed for that age group. So why is this suddenly being injected into this program? It makes no sense to me.
These are the same people that are getting rid of the GATE program, which is the gifted and talented. My kid's in it. They want to equalize it, but what they want to do is bring it down to the dumbest level. Instead of trying to level the bottom kids up, they want to dumb down the top kids to make the bottom kids feel accepted. And that's not the way it works. There is no participation trophy for everybody. There are winners and losers, and it's an important lesson for kids to understand how that works and understand what it's like to lose at times. And that's a learning experience. And you need to go through that. And these self-entitled kids that we see today, that they don't know how to do anything and they just complain about everything. That's how they got there.
Well said. And Dennis Miller years ago had a joke about this when they decided to take dodgeball out of school. He said, life is just one big game of getting kicked in the nuts with a ball. It's important that that happens. These are learning experiences, and we're depriving our children from these learning experiences. You can't save kids from pain. You can try, but they've got to face it that one day there will be a real world. Okay, moving on. I want to go to Kevin Youkilis, former baseball player, amazing, amazing World Series champion. But there's something very interesting. Trump has shown how to fight back against the media. Republicans often don't follow. And Kevin Youkilis went after AOC, and I just want to quote him because AOC wrote on X after this Boulder thing, anti-Semitism is on the rise here at home, and we have a moral responsibility to confront and stop it everywhere it exists. But World Series champ Kevin Youkilis found her words hollow and slammed the lawmaker for failing to speak out against the same anti-Semitism running rampant in New York City. Jews are targeted with violence, and it's the same virtue signal post time and time again, he wrote on X.
AOC, who is a disciple of the Democratic Socialists of America, who we've spoken about, who recently posted how they were A-OK with the murder of two innocent people because, hey, resistance got to be globalized, right? They wanted to free the murderer. That the two people who the murderer thought were Jewish. Okay, so we're specifically talking about anti-Semitic crime that she's now decrying. Oh, she's suddenly so verklempt about the whole thing. This is the same person who said that the Columbia encampments were so beautiful and wonderfully run. And the guy who ran those literally said out loud that you're lucky I'm not hunting Jews right now. So she's given her tacit approval to all of this. And now for her to suddenly realize that, uh-oh, there are consequences potentially, either for my political career or because people are actually dying now. It's no longer just cosplay. For her to suddenly come out and start saying this is bad, Intifada bad. I think that what Youkilis was saying is her thoughts and prayers can go fuck themselves.
Let me finish up his quote, by the way. To end the quote, man, he said, "What have you done to confront those calling for intifadas in New York City? Until you create a plan of action, your repeated virtue signaling after the violence occurs holds no weight," he added. Congrats to the radical mobs chanting for the intifadas in New York City, the former Boston Red Sox and New York Yankee player continued.
People like AOC are a gift and a curse. On the one hand, they're a gift because they're so demented and they're so far off from where the average American is that it becomes easy to beat them. You know, if they want to put the Bernie AOC ticket up to go up against JD in the next election, they're going to get smashed. That's the blessing. The curse is that you have maniacs like that introducing insane ideas that then become normalized. And the Palestinians have been doing this since the creation of the state of Israel. And you have it with nutjobs like Bernie, who's been doing it for as long as he's been alive. That crazy communist has been introducing socialism. And in the previous election, I mean, that guy had a good chance of being the nominee. And up until then, he was just a nutbag who owns 3 pairs of underwear. I mean, the guy's batshit crazy. So even though it's low-hanging fruit and it's easy to attack these people, I think they should be out. It's not good for the Democratic Party, but it's also bad for the nation to have insane people like that being elevated and having their ideas pushed forward as if it's mainstream.
Well said. And Golan, years ago, I had written an article called and they named it. You went to bed with Hillary and woke up with Bernie. The whole point of the article was there's a Bernie Sanders in every synagogue in probably in the country, the crazy old guy screaming that everything should be free. So it was amazing how I found it that Americans were romanticizing somebody that was in every synagogue. But eventually you grow up and you realize his thoughts, you need to pay for electricity. Not everything could be free. Everything costs money. And that's a major problem with Democrats, especially the younger version of the AOCs. You got to pay for these programs go along. They're not free.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what we're talking about is performative gestures that are really meaningless. Saying, I want to give you everything for free is the same thing like calling out calling out violence, but not calling out the ideology behind it. I mean, the whole thing here is literally just saying what she thinks her people want to hear at any particular moment, or what is most politically expedient, or what is going to gain her the most virtue signal points, and on and on. At the end of the day, it seems like what Youkilis did is what our politicians should be doing. You know, we talked yesterday about Fetterman, we talked about McCormick, but it seems like it's Fetterman, McCormick, and Youkilis, because I think we're done. Even Trump didn't call it anti-Semitism after people were lit on fire by an Egyptian national screaming about Gaza. So I think I need everyone else to start to step up a little more.
I'll pull a mend on this one and say Trump has gone above and beyond for the Jewish community. So I will gladly give him a pass for not mentioning it on a text. But the bigger point is Trump is constantly fighting the media. He's constantly, and nobody follows. So yes, Fetterman and a few others realize how you fight back. And Mend, I'll let you finish this one up because I know how much you enjoy that.
I think Trump did great. Trump did not just make it. I mean, he did. The White House did put out a statement saying, you know, there's no place for anti-Semitism and all that. But Trump accurately stated it as a terrorist attack on Americans, and there's no place for that, and we're not going to tolerate it. So, bravo, kudos to that guy for doing that.
I got your back today. Don't worry.
I got to just say, you know, I got to push back a little bit because I get it, but I think it's important for us to also be honest that we are in a world, whether it's the right or wrong world, it's the world that we're in, a world in which we call things out in specific demographic kind of ways. Before, if it was BLM or if it was violence against Asians, they made people their cause célèbre. And if they didn't do that, general violence became something that dissipated very, very quickly. And so, yes, we want to make sure we don't get terrorist attacks on American soil, obviously. We want to make sure that terrorists are not attacking Americans, obviously. But right now, we need someone to step up and say something specific about the Jewish community, because right now, we are at a point where the Jewish community is in more danger than they have ever been in my lifetime, and maybe since World War II. Now, I don't mean just in America. There are numbers that just came out of Europe that say the same thing. France is at 6% in terms of supporting Israel. These things are really dangerous, really scary. And if we don't have someone like Trump leading the way in calling it out by name, then it's not enough. Not for me.
There's a couple of things to that. One is that Trump and the White House did call it out by name as anti-Semitic attack, but I think what he did was intentional. I think what he did was show that there's a radical lefty that is firebombing Americans here in America, or a radical lefty that shot two people in Washington. In America. These are attacks in America on our soil, unacceptable. And that just deflates the left. They love to say, yes, this is unacceptable, but, you know, there's always a but. It didn't happen in a vacuum or whatever. There's always a statement where they place blame on the victims. They victim blame all the time when it comes to the Jews. In this instance, he just made it about them attacking in America, and that's unacceptable. And I agree with that. As far as France goes, France just burned itself down. I mean, you looked at the riots yesterday or 2 days ago. France is lost. France and the UK are both capitulating to the radical Muslims within their midst, the ones that they allowed to immigrate into their countries. And it's just a slippery slope downhill. And Canada is not far behind them. So you can't look at those countries and say, whoa, we're losing ground there. They're losing ground to themselves. The French and the British are being raped and pillaged by the people that they invited into their countries, not to mention the Norwegian countries. So yeah, We don't need to look at that. Those guys need to fix themselves.
Well said. And just to close this up, Golan, on Men's point, I agree with him. His take on this is actually correct, and it's even far deeper than that. Jewish support in America is an all-time low. Trump is a brilliant strategist. So instead of focusing it on this, and because it wouldn't matter if Trump said Jews. It really would not have mattered. Most importantly, what might matter to some Americans is that we're having terrorist attacks in our country. And that's just a fact. I want to move on because Friday night, I want to say it was Friday, Barcelona decided to stop trading with Tel Aviv. And I had texted Golan, please be safe. And there's a news story now out of Europe that support for Israel is at an all-time low. And I wrote, shocking, absolutely shocking after every BBC report, every Guardian report, every Gaza report to those organizations and every media, every the Independent, every rag you guys got out there, go on, and I'm shocked.
I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked. This is the same
Kidding.
place that. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not shocked because this is the same place that perpetuated basically all the horrors of World War II. You know, Mend makes a point that I could not agree with more, which is they have imported more of the people who hate the West, which of course includes Israel, includes the Jews, because ultimately the Jews are continually innovating and making the world a better place. Well, they don't want the world to be a better place. So the more of them you import, the more likely it is they're going to hate them, and the more likely it is they're going to spread the lies that Hamas is spreading currently and that everyone seems to be swallowing in the mainstream media. This is it's getting worse all the time. And I live over here. So what I do notice is there are places where the people don't agree. You know, I live in Barcelona. The people here have been very supportive. I am very outspoken. Those of you who are watching this on video can see what my office looks like. Normally, I have a T-shirt on that has some kind of message on it about Jews or about Israel. I wear chains with stars and everything else. I do not hide who I am. And people have given me support, all but one person that I've encountered. I've only had one bad experience here. The government, on the other hand, is a disaster. This started before October 7th. Spain has been against Jews for a very, very long time. And you can go back in history to see when they kicked us all out of their country and during the Inquisition and everything else. Today, 3 hours ago, Spain reneged on an anti-tank missile program out of Israel. Rafael, the military contractor, was supposed to sell $325 million worth of anti-tank missiles. They didn't just renege on the contract. They waited till the last second to make it hurt economically as well. That's the kind of thing the government here does. So a number of months ago, the Spanish government decided we're cutting ties with Israel. Then a new person came in and they said, no, that's ridiculous. They reestablished ties. That person is the person that is now cutting ties once again. So the government is really the tip of the spear when it comes to anti-Semitism here. And that is not just in Spain, but in France and all over Europe. I think this is something that is indicative of their mentality that is still stuck in the past. And because they have all these people infiltrating their country, they are just becoming what they hate.
Man, I want to get to you with this because I think it's extremely important because I still believe the number in America of support for Israel is at 80%. But that is something you would not know because the 10% or the 20% are so damn loud, you would think that Israel has lost the support of America. And I don't believe that's true. And I want to thank great Americans for still supporting the right side.
I got two parts to this. One is this playbook that vilifies Israel has been used by dictators throughout the Middle East for the last 50 years. So when things are going wrong in Iraq, Saddam Hussein would lob a missile at Israel and tell his people, we're fighting to kill the Jews. And that just rallies up the base. They love it. It's red meat for the base. To this day, when there's unrest in Turkey, their leader comes out and calls Israel Nazis. You know, he just riles the base, throw them a little red meat and they'll forget about what's going on locally and domestically. And now we're seeing it in the West. You're seeing it in France, where he throws a little red meat to their radicals and says, we're going to cut ties, you know, genocide, all this other nonsense. And you're seeing it in Spain with their woke liberal government. So the good thing is that there's a shift to the right throughout Europe, and hopefully we see more of that, and a little bit in South America with Javier Milei. Um, people people are waking up to this nonsense. And the one thing that Israel needs to do, and this also touches on what's going on here in America, the Democratic Party has shifted way away from Israel. The young people, which are being brainwashed by Harvard and MIT and Columbia and CNN and MSNBC and all these other outlets, they're shifting in a massive way away from Israel. So what does Israel have to do? Israel has no choice. They could either be dead with a good name and great, reputation, or they could be alive with a black eye. So they need to get the job done. They just need to do what they need to do and get that job done. Continue doing what you're doing. Hopefully they get it over with fast and eradicate this Hamas problem quickly, possibly relocate all those Palestinians back to Egypt and Jordan and move on. The only thing you can do at this point is get space away from this chapter. The faster they can close this chapter, clean it out, get the hostages back, and move on is the only pathway forward. You're not going to have a good reputation while this war is ongoing. So just hammer away, get it done, move on.
Golda Meir had a quote: "I'd rather have the world hate us and we'd be alive than have their sympathy and we'd be dead." I think that says it all.
Brilliant point, both of you. Brilliant points, both of you, I should say. And the last thing I want to get to today is this amazing Ukraine bridge attack and the whole attack Ukraine pulled off. We've discussed on the show, whatever your opinions of how after the war happened, the fact that the Ukraine is still fighting and this attack was insanely amazing. And the fact that there's not more support for it, I'm a little lost.
I got wind of the ceasefire proposal, I guess, or the peace proposal that Russia put forward, and it is hysterical. Forget about everything else, where they want to keep all the land that they got thus far. And they want the Ukrainians to change their official language to Russian. They threw something in there that is absolutely never going to happen. So
they're just trolling at this point.
Yeah. At this point, I think it's safe to say that the Russians are not interested in ending the war. And let's see what happens next. I hope it does not get to the point where we give the Ukrainians enough weapons that the Russians feel backed into a corner that they need to drop a small nuke on Kiev. I hope we don't make it there. I hope we don't make it to World War III. But it's a crazy time.
Hold on. I think everybody hopes the same thing. But if you listen to certain experts that we listen to, Russia's money is quickly evaporating. The amount of troops they could call up is quickly disappearing. But again, none of us are sure exactly how many troops Russia is able to get, how many troops the Ukrainians are able to get. I just know this, that Russia is not serious about this. And Trump has to look at this because 5 days ago, he gave them a 2-week red line. Golan, to Men's point, they're obviously not serious about this.
Absolutely not. I mean, this is something where we already know how the Russians use their troops. I call it the meat grinder approach, where they don't care whether these people, it's similar to Hamas, actually. They don't care whether these people are trained. They don't care whether they've ever fired a shot. They just say, here's your uniform and get going. And just in April, just a couple of months ago, Russia initiated its largest conscription program since the war started and brought in 150,000, or I think it was more than 150,000 people between the ages of 18 and 30. And they did the same thing from the penal colonies, another 180,000. They're just going to, as long as there are people that they can snag and throw in front of the meat grinder, they will continue doing it because their only goal is to prolong the war. And part of that is what's going on with this treaty or this peace offering, which is clearly nothing. It's just buying time. They just want to keep buying time, keep trolling, leading Trump along, leading America along. Until someone finally gets tired or Vance gets his way and we walk away from it and hand everything over.
You know what? That said, I still think that it was the right move to try diplomacy. You don't go in there and just
Nobody's
arm
disagreeing.
and bomb. So it was the right
No,
move.
I think we all agree that diplomacy is the right start.
None
I
of
think
us
at a certain
disagree.
point you realize you don't have a partner in the peace process, and then maybe it's time to start pulling triggers.
I think that's becoming apparent. I think it's becoming apparent that the Russians are not serious about ending it because they're actually gaining ground. So let's see what happens next. I don't know what Trump's plans are, but I think he's going to impose heavy, heavy sanctions on Russia, and I think they're going to add some more arms or allow the Europeans to add arms or give arms to the Ukrainians.
Just for the record, none of us disagree with you about the diplomatic stuff. I was screaming about that for 4 years, especially, like I said, when they pulled out the embassy. That was the worst mistake when we pulled out the embassy out of Russia, because instantly that said we can't do negotiations. And I respect Trump greatly for trying negotiations. As we've learned from Trump, he hates death. He hates watching people lose lives, no matter where it is. And he is really the peacemaker, and he's trying, but sometimes it's just you come up short, and that will probably happen with Iran. I don't want to speculate, but that same deal, it's looking the same.
It's interesting that Trump came out today and said that zero enrichment in Iran because there's all sorts of rumors that he's going to allow
Yeah.
them to do 3% enrichment. They cannot do any enrichment on their soil. And if that's the deal that he makes, great. It's a good deal. We could go in and inspect and figure it out and make sure that they're not violating. And if they do, bombs away.
Go on. I just want to end quickly with this. I find it amazing with Islam and that those countries, whatever people want to say, the one thing they're extremely great at is putting out fake news. They have learned the art of branding and social marketing like nobody I've ever seen. So if you want tunnel builders or social marketers after this war is done, look no further than the Gazans that are still alive.
Look, the Nazis, when they wanted to get their message out, they used radio towers, right? And they were broadcasting radio all over the world. Everything the Muslims do today is based on Nazi ideology 2.0. Okay, so what did they do? They didn't broadcast one message out to everybody. They did individualized messaging to each territory, comparing the Jews to whoever that particular group hated, lying about the Jews' history in lockstep with whatever that group was going to believe. They did that individually because it made it something that each group could believe and feel like they had ownership over. So their hatred of the Jews was different than your hate. Ours is legitimate because it has to do with our history. So they tailored it each time. The Muslims learn from that. And each time they go out to the world, they make sure that the message is whatever it is that they see the world is going to respond to. There is a recording that unfortunately I have not been able to find again, but I listened to at the beginning of this Gaza war. And it was a meeting of Muslims talking about how the Americans love social justice. They think all Black people are victims and they think all white people are evil. So we have to have the narrative that we are the Black people. And if we can do that, we will convince them that we are the victims. And even though we're the ones raping, killing, starting the war, and everything else, we'll be able to convince them that we're the ones that deserve sympathy. They did that to a T, starting by making sure that they partnered up with BLM before all of this started. BLM, when it began, had in its charter anti-Jewish and anti-Israel stuff. They were being taught by the Palestinians how to push back against police and how to start propaganda narratives. And it worked for them too. They made a lot of money off of it. So this is not a surprise. This is something they have been fine-tuning for decades just for this purpose.
I think it's absolutely accurate. I think anybody who donated to BLM was a fool and you got fleeced. And these people bought mansions. Good for you.
That's what I love about Mend. He gets straight to the point. I want to thank everybody that's been downloading the episodes on Spotify and Apple, wherever you are able to get a podcast. And I also want to remind people to please follow us on Substack, The Daily Cheat Sheet, Instagram, The Daily Cheat Sheet, and Mend. Where can people find us on X?
TD Cheat Sheet, the Daily Cheat Sheet, TD Cheat Sheet.
And on that note, have a great morning, day, and night, world, wherever you are.